A summer evening in the small town of Lakeview, Pennsylvania, was calm as usual. The town was known for its ancient architecture, small cafes, and large forests that surrounded it from all sides. The trees stood quietly, as if hiding dark secrets that no one dared to speak about. Tom Andrews sat on the porch of his house and watched the sun slowly set over the horizon. His hands, strong and hardened by years of work in a car workshop, held a can of cold beer. He had long been accustomed to solitude, although he sometimes missed the company of friends with whom he grew up. Today he got a message from Laura, who suggested they get together like old times. Laura Hunt, a nurse at the hospital, was the epitome of kindness and compassion. She worked the night shift, so she often had to watch the life of the city through the window when most people were already asleep. Laura always tried to stay positive, even when life seemed difficult. She cared about each patient like her own family and was always ready to help. Today she decided to call old friends and invite them to meet by the lake. Michael Carter was a complicated man. He worked as a truck driver and spent most of his life on the road. He was once known as a bully, but over the years he tried to stay out of trouble. However, his past always haunted him. When he got the message from Laura, he felt he had to go to this meeting. Something had been bothering him lately, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Jessica Fleming returned to Lakeview just a few months ago after many years in New York. She became a successful lawyer, but the big metropolis exhausted her. Jessica decided to return home, hoping to find some peace and quiet. Her work was stressful, but she could never turn down a challenge. When she got a message from Laura, she agreed to meet up, wanting to see old friends and relax a bit. Eddie Miller was the youngest of the group, but his technical skills always impressed everyone. He worked at a local computer store, but spent his spare time hacking and finding information that others couldn't get. Eddie liked to solve puzzles and often helped his friends in difficult situations. The meeting seemed interesting to him, and he immediately agreed. Gathering together by the lake, friends reminisced about old times, laughed, and shared news about their lives. They hadn't seen each other in months, and this meeting was like a breath of fresh air for each of them. They talked about plans for the future and how they would like to spend more time together. Night fell on the city, and the friends decided to take a walk in the forest. The forest was mysterious and dark, but for them, it was a place where they spent their childhood, where they hid from the world and sought adventure. They walked, remembering how they used to run along these paths, and did not notice how they wandered into the depths of the forest. Suddenly Laura stopped. Her intuition, which never failed her, told her that something was wrong. She felt cold sweat on her hands and held her breath. Tom, who was walking beside her, noticed her concern and stopped. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Laura nodded in the direction of a small clearing where something dark, motionless, lay. It was a man's body. The body lay in the grass, half hidden by the shadows of the trees. At first glance, it was difficult to understand who it was, but Michael, who was standing a little behind, recognized the man. "This is George Weston," he said, clenching his fists. "He is the owner of a construction company in the city." Jessica crouched next to the body, trying to determine if there was still a chance to save it. She quickly realized that Weston was already dead. "It's murder," she said, examining the body. "Most likely he was hit in the back of the head." The friends exchanged worried looks. Instead of calling the police immediately, they sensed that this murder might be connected to something bigger that was better not publicized. In a small town, such cases never remain a secret, and their lives could be changed forever if they become part of the investigation. Tom felt the pressure of being responsible for everyone else. His heart was beating faster, but he tried to keep his cool. "We must find out who did it," he said. "If we go to the police, they can charge us or simply shut up the matter. Or we'll be in danger," Laura added, realizing that they needed to be careful. Eddie started to look for the phone, but Tom stopped him. "No calls," he said. "If it's someone from the town, they might find out that we found the body. We have to find the evidence before anyone finds out we were here," Jessica decided, her legal instinct kicking in. "But for this, we need information. Who knew more about Weston than we did?" Michael thought. His connections with the criminal world could help, but he was not ready to reveal all the cards. He simply nodded and said, "I know where to start, but it will be dangerous." The friends decided that they would not report the find to the police, but would instead start their own investigation. They agreed to meet the next day and develop a plan of action. Each of them returned home, feeling the weight of what had happened. Little did they know that this investigation would change their lives forever. The next day, Lakeview was quiet as usual, but silence became difficult for friends. They met in a small cafe near the central square, where they used to gather after school. Each of them was immersed in their own thoughts. "We should start by finding out more about George Weston," Tom said. "He was a person that everyone knew, but few people trusted. He had connections with corrupt politicians and businessmen," Jessica added, recalling some of the conversations she overheard while working as a lawyer in New York. "He always played by the rules, but he created these rules himself. If Weston was involved in dark affairs, there is a good chance that his death was not an accident," said Eddie. "Maybe one of his business partners decided to close the issue in his own way." "We need to find out who he has been working with lately," continued Michael. "Perhaps there is a clue that will lead us to the killer." Laura listened carefully, trying to understand how all this would affect their lives. Her intuition told her that they were on a very dangerous path. "I can try to learn more through my patients," Laura suggested. "Some of them work for Weston or in companies connected to him. Maybe they know more than they are willing to tell. And I will be able to check the computer databases, find information that is not available to ordinary people," said Eddie. His eyes glittered with the anticipation of the challenge. "All right," Tom said as he made up his mind. "Laura, you will ask the patients, Eddie. You will look for information online. I'll talk to some old friends who know what's going on in town." "I will," said Jessica. "Try to contact my colleagues in New York to see if they have any information about Weston. He could be involved in affairs outside our town." "And I?" Michael paused before continuing. "I'll find out which of the criminal elements might have reason to want Weston dead. But this requires caution." The meeting ended with each of the friends receiving their task. They realized that they had to act quickly, but at the same time carefully, so as not to draw too much attention to themselves. They knew they were taking a risk, but they couldn't back down. George Weston's body had left a shadow over their lives, and now that shadow was getting bigger. The next few days were spent in busy work. Laura, by questioning her patients, learned that Weston had been visiting the local clinic a lot lately, though no one knew why. One of the patients, an old accountant, recalled seeing Weston with a man in an expensive suit. They were having a serious conversation, and it looked like it wasn't just a friendly conversation. Eddie was able to find some important files hidden on the net. He discovered that Weston was connected to several offshore companies incorporated in the Caribbean. These companies had suspiciously many assets, but did not conduct any specific activity. This could mean only one thing: Weston was laundering the money or investing it in something illegal. Jessica, contacting her colleagues in New York, learned that Weston was no stranger to big business. He was involved in several large real estate deals, some of which involved people known for their brutality and unscrupulousness. It added another layer to the already complex picture of his life. Michael, meanwhile, met with his old acquaintance from the criminal world. The man who asked not to be named said Weston had been meddling lately. He allegedly tried to negotiate with someone from the local mafia, but something went wrong. It was the first real clue that could point to a motive for the murder. When the friends got together again, they already had much more information than before. Everyone brought something different, and the puzzle began to come together. Weston was engaged in something much more serious than just a construction business, Tom concluded. He attracted a lot of money, and it seems that he crossed the path of someone very dangerous. Maybe this is the lead we need, Eddie said, showing the files he had found. But you have to be careful. If it's really the mafia, they won't leave us alone if they find out we're digging into their affairs. We have to go on, Jessica said firmly. But now we need to act even more carefully. One wrong move, and we could lose everything. We've started this journey, and now there's no turning back, Laura added, feeling her heart tighten with tension. The next day, Eddie received an anonymous message on his phone. It was just a few words. Stop before it's too late. He didn't know who could have sent it, but he realized that their actions had already caught someone's attention. Someone knows we're digging, he told his friends during another meeting. This is a warning. But whoever it is, he wants us to stop. Maybe it's just trying to scare us, Tom pointed out. But we must be ready for anything. The friends agreed not to stop their investigation, but each of them now began to look over their shoulders, fearing that they were being watched. Laura noticed that a black car drove up to her house several times, stood there for a few minutes, and then disappeared. Tom began to carry a gun with him, although he had never felt the need for it before. Michael, trying to learn more, began to visit places where people from the criminal world gathered more often. He tried not to draw attention to himself, but one day he noticed that someone was watching him. It was the same man he had talked to about Weston. Michael realized that he was in the middle of a game in which the stakes were too high. Jessica received a message from one of her colleagues who worked in law enforcement. He warned her that something was brewing in Lakeview and that she had better stay away from any investigations. But she was already too deeply involved in this matter to simply step aside. The friends decide they need to gather all the information they have and find out who is behind Weston's murder before their actions lead to irreversible consequences. They knew that there was not much time left and that every step they took could be fatal. In the darkness that enveloped their lives, they began to see shadows that had previously remained hidden, and these shadows were now coming closer and closer to them, turning each day into a struggle for survival. Tom received a phone call from his old acquaintance, Joe, who used to work with him in an auto repair shop, and later moved to a shady business. This person knew a lot about the criminal underworld of Lakeview and could be useful in the investigation. The meeting was scheduled for late evening in an abandoned warehouse outside the city. Tom decided to go alone, not wanting to put his friends in danger. He threw on an old leather jacket and tucked the gun under his belt, ready for anything. His car drove up to the warehouse when it was already dark. Spotlights on the gates illuminated the gray walls, casting long shadows. Dead silence reigned inside the warehouse. Tom walked in, feeling a slight chill down his spine. His acquaintance, Joe, stood at the end of the large room, leaning on an old wooden box. "Tom," Joe greeted, his voice low and a little husky. "I heard you're digging deeper than you need to." "I need some information, Joe," Tom replied, moving closer to him. "I know that you know a lot. Who killed Weston?" Joe laughed, but there was no joy in his laugh. "Tom, you're a gamer, but you've fallen into a game that's not for you. Weston played on two fronts, and it cost him dearly. But you should know that his death is only the tip of the iceberg. There's something more behind it, something you don't want to know." "I'm already involved in it," said Tom, not backing down. "Tell me everything you know." Joe sighed as if making a difficult decision. "Okay, Tom. But remember one thing. You must stay away from it. The people who killed Weston were not just gangsters. They have connections in the government, in the police, even in large corporations. This is more than just a crime. They control everything, and if you interfere with them, they will wipe you out." Tom felt everything inside him tense up. His investigation could lead to disaster, but he had no intention of stopping. "Who are they?" asked Tom. "There is an organization that oversees all the major operations in this region," Joe explained. "They work under the guise of legal businesses, but behind them are very influential people. Weston was only their tool. He wanted to get out of their control and start his game, but it was his undoing. How do we find them?" Tom could hardly restrain himself from calling Joe for an even more detailed conversation. "You won't find them," said Joe bitterly. "They are always one step ahead. The only advice I can give you is to forget all this and get out of town before it's too late." Tom remained thoughtful as Joe left the room. There was only one question on his mind. Would he be able to protect his friends if he continued this investigation? Returning to his friends, Tom shared the information he had received. Their suspicions were confirmed. Very influential people were behind Weston's death. But now they realized that they were dealing with a game in which they were only pawns. "We can't fight them on our own," Tom said, rubbing his chin. "If this organization is so powerful, we need allies. But where to find them?" "There is one option," Jessica answered. "I know that the FBI has been trying to infiltrate this organization for several years. They are looking for evidence to destroy it. If we can collect enough information, we can be the key to their success." "But how do we contact the FBI without attracting the attention of the Black Hand?" Laura asked. "They clearly already know that we are looking for something. Any careless step can put us under attack." "We can use Victor," Eddie suggested. "If he can contact the FBI agents and explain the situation, they can set up a meeting in a safe place. But it will be risky for him." "If he agrees to help," added Michael, "we can give them all the information we have gathered. This may give us a chance for salvation." Jessica agreed to contact Victor and offer him this plan. She understood that it would be a big risk for Victor, but they had no other way. They had to trust each other, even if it meant putting their own lives at risk. Victor did not answer Jessica's call for a long time. She was already beginning to worry that he would refuse to help, but after a few hours, he did call back. His voice was tired, but determined. "I'll contact an FBI agent I know," Victor said. "But you must understand that it is very dangerous. If we are exposed, we will all be in danger." "We understand that," Jessica replied. "But we have no other choice. We have to try." A meeting with an FBI agent was scheduled for a few days later at a small motel on the outskirts of town. The friends agreed that only Jessica would go to the meeting, so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion. They planned to give the agent all the information they had gathered and agree on the next course of action. Jessica couldn't sleep the night before the meeting. She sat on the bed, considering all possible options for the development of events. If they are exposed, the Black Hand will not leave them alive. But she knew that this was the only chance for them all. The next morning, Jessica left for the motel. She took with her all the information she had collected: documents, files, photographs, anything that could help FBI agents solve this case. There was anxiety in her soul, but she kept calm. As she drove up to the motel, her heart beat faster. She looked around for any signs of danger. The motel was old and run down, a place that didn't attract too much attention. The agent was supposed to be waiting for her in one of the rooms. Jessica stopped the car and slowly got out. She entered the motel and climbed the stairs to the second floor. Her steps echoed in the empty corridor. She reached the door of number 23, where the meeting was to take place. She stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and tapped. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a business suit appeared before her. He looked calm and professional. "Are you Jessica Fleming?" he asked, looking straight into her eyes. "Yes, it's me," she replied, trying not to show her excitement. "Come through," the man said, stepping aside so she could enter. The room was small but cozy. The FBI agent motioned her to a chair, and Jessica sat down, carefully placing a folder of documents in front of her. "I'm Agent Harris," the man introduced himself. "Victor told me about your situation. What do you have for us?" Jessica began to tell everything that she and her friends had learned. She handed him the documents and explained how they were related to the Black Hand organization. The agent listened attentively, going through the papers. Harris said when she finished, "But we will need more evidence to open a large-scale case. Is there anyone else who could testify against this organization?" "We can find people," Jessica replied, "but it will be dangerous. If we are exposed, we will take care of your safety," her agent assured her. "But you need to be careful. We must collect enough information to leave them no chance." Jessica was relieved to know they had support, but also knew there was still a lot of work ahead. "Thank you, Agent Harris," she said, standing up. "We will do our best to help you." "And one more thing," said Harris when she was about to leave. "Be careful. These people are dangerous. If you feel that something is wrong, please contact me immediately." Jessica nodded and left the room, her heart still pounding in her chest. She knew she had taken an important step, but the game was just beginning. Returning to her friends, Jessica told about the meeting. They decided to continue collecting evidence, working in the shadows and trying not to attract the attention of the Black Hand. Their plan was to find people who could testify and give the FBI all the information they could. Michael began looking for former Weston employees who might know about his connections to the organization. Eddie continued digging through the databases, looking for financial clues that might prove illegal activity. Laura, for her part, tried through the patients to find out more about which of the local authorities might be involved in these cases. Days passed, and the tension grew. They felt that every step they took could be their last, and that they were constantly being watched. But they could not stop. They knew they had gone too far. One evening, when Tom was returning home after another meeting with Michael, he suddenly noticed that the road he usually drove was blocked. In front of him stood 2 black cars, from which several men got out. Tom instinctively reached for his gun, but realized that there were more of them, and the chances of success were small. One of the men, tall and stocky, came up to Tom, smiling. "We've waited a long time for this moment, Tom," he said. "Did you think you could dig under us and stay unscathed?" Tom felt his heart tighten in his chest. He realized that he was trapped. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said, trying to control himself. "We have allies." "Allies?" The man laughed. Your allies are just pawns in our game. They will not save you. Tom realized that something had to be done, and quickly, otherwise, he would not survive. He turned the steering wheel sharply, trying to go around the cars, but the men were already ready. Shots rang out, and Tom felt one of the bullets go through his tire. The car lost control and stopped on the side of the road. Jumping out of the car, Tom rushed into the woods, hoping to find shelter in the darkness. He was pursued, but he was fast and knew these places like the back of his hand. He ran without looking back, hearing screams and gunshots behind him. Stopping at the old shack, Tom finally caught his breath. His heart was beating wildly, but he knew he couldn't stay here much longer. He must find his friends and warn them. They are all in danger. Tom took out his phone and tried to call Jessica, but there was no connection. He realized that they could be in danger right now. Deciding to waste no time, he began to make his way through the woods to Laura's house, hoping they were still safe. When he finally reached the house, he saw that the light was on inside. Tom came closer, looking carefully around. He knocked on the door, and in a moment Laura opened it, looking surprised and worried. "Volume, what happened?" she asked, seeing his excited look. "We need to get everyone together right away," he said as he walked inside. "They know about us. We are under threat." Laura nodded and quickly began calling the others. In a few minutes, all friends gathered. They realized that their actions had been exposed and that time was running out. "We need to find a safe place where we can hide and continue our investigation," Tom said, his voice determined. "If they find us here, we will not survive." "But where will we go?" Jessica asked. "They are probably already looking for us everywhere." "There is one option," said Eddie. "My old acquaintance has a shelter outside the city, which few people know about. We can temporarily hide there and think about our next steps." The friends decided that this was their only chance. They gathered the essentials and quickly left for the place that Eddie suggested. The road to the shelter was long and exhausting. The friends constantly looked around, fearing that they might be pursued. But they reached the place without incident. The shelter was hidden in thick woods, far from the road, and looked abandoned, but safe. It was cold and damp inside the building, but the friends felt safe. They knew they had to be very careful now. Their main goal is to collect enough evidence to hand over to the FBI while still staying alive. They split into groups, each responsible for their part of the plan. Michael and Laura collected information on possible witnesses. Eddie tried to find new financial leads, and Tom and Jessica worked to arrange a new meeting with Agent Harris. Time passed. Tension grew. The friends knew that their chances of success were slim, but they had no other choice. They had to go to the end, even if it meant sacrifice. One evening, when they all gathered to discuss their results, a car unexpectedly approached the shelter. Friends held their breath, trying to understand who it could be. Tom walked cautiously to the window, looking out. To their surprise, it was Agent Harris. He got out of the car and started approaching the building. "What is he doing here?" whispered Laura. "Perhaps he brought news," said Tom, eyeing the agent suspiciously. When Harris walked in, his face was serious. "I found you because we got word that you were wanted," he said, looking at each of them. "Your actions did not go unnoticed, and now the Black Hand knows more about you than you think. But we can help you." The friends listened attentively, feeling that their situation was becoming more and more dangerous. "We have prepared an operation to arrest several key figures of this organization," Harris continued. "But we need your help. You will have to testify and provide all the evidence you have. It will be risky, but it's the only way to stop them." The friends realized that this was their only chance for salvation. They agreed to cooperate with the FBI, even knowing that it could cost them their lives. After a short meeting, the friends, together with Agent Harris, left for the place where the operation was to take place. They understood that this was their last chance to end this nightmare. The operation was quick and efficient. Thanks to information provided by friends, the FBI was able to arrest several key figures in the Black Hand. But the struggle is not over yet. Friends knew that many remained at large and that their lives were still in danger. A few months later, they were able to return to normal life, but with the feeling that the shadow of the Black Hand still hung over them. They have learned to live with this anxiety, realizing that security is only an illusion. However, they did what they thought was right. They stopped the evil that threatened their city, even if it cost them peace. And though their lives would never be the same again, they knew that this fight was worth every sacrifice.